There exists a frequency so ancient, so profound, that discovering it fundamentally changes everything about your existence. This is not metaphorical speaking. This is not wishful thinking. This is a literal transformation that occurs when you align with what the ancients called the divine resonance, the sacred vibration that underlies all of creation. Throughout history, mystery schools, secret societies, and spiritual masters have guarded this knowledge carefully. They understood that this frequency is not merely a concept to be intellectually grasped, but a living reality that, when accessed, grants you direct communion with the source of all existence. Today, we're going to explore what happens when you discover this sacred frequency and how it transforms every aspect of your human experience. If this is your first time here, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our deep dives into ancient wisdom and spiritual transformation. We regularly explore topics that mainstream society doesn't want you to understand, knowledge that can set you free from the limitations that have been placed upon your consciousness. Before we begin, let me ask you something. Have you ever experienced a moment where everything seemed to align perfectly, where the universe appeared to be conspiring in your favor, where synchronicities flowed like water and you felt connected to something infinitely larger than yourself? If so, you may have briefly touched upon this sacred frequency without even realizing it. The ancient Egyptians called it the frequency of Mad, the divine order that governs all existence. The Hindus referred to it as Om, the primordial sound from which all creation emerges. The Kabbalists spoke of it as the divine emanation, the light that flows from the Ein Sof, the infinite source. Different cultures, different names, but all pointing to the same fundamental truth. There exists a vibrational state that, when accessed, connects you directly to the creative force of the universe. But what exactly is this frequency? To understand this, we must first recognize that everything in existence is vibration. Your thoughts are vibrations. Your emotions are vibrations. Your physical body is vibration slowed down to appear as matter. The chair you're sitting on, the air you're breathing, the light that illuminates your room, all of it is energy vibrating at different frequencies. Modern quantum physics has confirmed what ancient mystics have always known. At the deepest level of reality, there is no solid matter. There are only fields of energy, waves of possibility, vibrations creating the illusion of form. When you understand this, you begin to see that finding God's secret frequency is not about discovering something external to yourself. It's about remembering the vibrational state that you already are at your core. The secret frequency operates on multiple levels simultaneously. On the physical level, it manifests as specific brainwave patterns. When measured, individuals accessing this state consistently show theta and delta wave dominance, the same patterns observed in deep meditation, mystical experiences, and moments of profound insight. But this is merely the surface level. On the emotional level, this frequency corresponds to what can only be described as unconditional love, but not love as humans typically understand it. This is love without object, love without condition, love that exists for its own sake. It's the love that a mother feels for her child, but extended infinitely to encompass all of existence. When you access this frequency, you don't feel love for specific things. You become love itself. On the mental level, the frequency manifests as what the mystics call gnosis, direct knowing. Thoughts don't arise from mental effort or logical deduction. Instead, knowledge flows through you like water through a clear stream. You don't think about reality, you know reality directly. The veil between the known and unknown dissolves, and you gain access to what the ancients called the Akashic records, the infinite library of all knowledge and possibility. On the spiritual level, the frequency represents your return to unity consciousness. The illusion of separation that defines ordinary human experience simply evaporates. You don't become one with God, you remember that you never stopped being God. The wave realizes it was always the ocean. The drop recognizes its true nature as the entire sea. Now you might be wondering, if this frequency is so accessible, why don't more people experience it? The answer lies in understanding the nature of interference patterns. Just as radio static can block a clear signal, the mental, emotional, and energetic noise of modern life creates interference that prevents you from tuning into this sacred frequency. Consider the constant bombardment of information your consciousness endures daily. Social media notifications, news updates, advertising messages, workplace stress, relationship conflicts, financial concerns. Each of these creates its own vibrational signature, and collectively they form what we might call the frequency of separation. This is the default state of consciousness for most humans, a chaotic mixture of fear, desire, judgment, and distraction that keeps you locked in the illusion of being separate from the divine source. But here's where it gets interesting. The moment you begin to reduce this interference, the sacred frequency naturally emerges. It's not something you have to create or acquire. It's something you have to uncover, like removing layers of dust from a mirror to reveal the reflection that was always there. The ancient practices of meditation, prayer, fasting, and contemplation were all designed with one purpose: to quiet the noise of ordinary consciousness so that the divine frequency could be heard. When Jesus spoke of the kingdom of heaven being within, he was pointing to this inner frequency. When Buddha spoke of nirvana, he was describing the peace that emerges when you align with this vibration. When Lao Tzu wrote about the Tao that cannot be named, he was attempting to describe this ineffable frequency that underlies all existence. But what actually happens when you find this frequency? The changes that occur are so profound that they can only be described as a complete transformation of your reality. Let me walk you through the specific stages of this awakening process. The first thing you'll notice is a dramatic shift in your relationship with time. Ordinary consciousness experiences time as linear, moving from past to future through the present moment. But when you access the sacred frequency, you step outside of time altogether. Past, present, and future begin to feel like artificial constructs. You start living in what the mystics call the eternal now, a timeless present where all possibilities exist simultaneously. This isn't just a philosophical concept. You'll actually experience it directly. Hours can pass in what feels like minutes when you're in deep alignment with this frequency. Conversely, a few moments of this expanded consciousness can feel like lifetimes of ordinary experience. Time becomes fluid, malleable, responsive to consciousness, rather than being a fixed container within which consciousness operates. The second major transformation involves your relationship with thought. In ordinary consciousness, you experience yourself as the thinker of your thoughts. But when you access the divine frequency, you begin to realize that thoughts are not yours at all. They arise spontaneously from the field of consciousness itself, and you are simply the witness, the aware presence through which they flow. This realization is extraordinarily liberating. You stop identifying with the content of your mind and instead recognize yourself as the consciousness that observes the mind. Negative thoughts lose their power because you no longer mistake them for your true self. Positive thoughts become inspirations flowing from the source rather than personal achievements to cling to. The third transformation affects your emotional life in ways that are difficult to describe. Emotions don't disappear, but they fundamentally change in nature. Instead of being reactions to external circumstances, emotions become expressions of your inner state. Joy doesn't depend on good things happening. Peace doesn't require the absence of conflict. Love doesn't need an object to love. You begin to understand what the mystics meant when they spoke of causeless joy, groundless happiness, and motiveless love. These emotional states arise not from external conditions, but from your alignment with the divine frequency itself. You become emotionally self-sustaining, generating your own inner, whether rather than being at the mercy of external circumstances. The fourth transformation involves your perception of other people and relationships. When you're operating from the sacred frequency, you begin to see through the masks that people wear. You perceive the divine essence in everyone, even when they themselves have forgotten it. This doesn't mean you become naive or ignore harmful behavior. Instead, you develop what we might call compassionate discernment, the ability to see clearly while maintaining love. Your relationships become less about getting your needs met and more about serving the awakening of consciousness itself. You find yourself naturally drawn to support others in remembering their true nature, not through preaching or teaching, but simply through your presence. People often comment that they feel more peaceful, more centered, more themselves when they're around you, though they may not understand why. The fifth transformation affects your relationship with the material world. Things don't lose their beauty or usefulness, but they stop defining your sense of self-worth or security. You begin to see through the illusion that happiness can be found in external acquisitions. This doesn't lead to poverty or asceticism necessarily, but rather to a natural simplicity where you're drawn to what truly serves your highest good and naturally repelled by what doesn't. Money, possessions, and status symbols become tools rather than goals. You might find yourself naturally gravitating toward a lifestyle that supports your spiritual development rather than one that impresses others or provides temporary pleasures. The compulsive quality that characterizes most people's relationship with material things simply dissolves. The sixth transformation is perhaps the most profound of all. It involves your understanding of death and what lies beyond physical existence. When you access the divine frequency, you begin to experientially understand that consciousness is not produced by the brain or contained within the body. You recognize yourself as the eternal awareness that inhabits temporary forms. This isn't a belief system or a hopeful philosophy. It's a direct knowing that emerges from your expanded state of consciousness. You might find yourself naturally remembering past lives, receiving visits from deceased loved ones, or simply knowing with absolute certainty that death is not the end of your existence, but merely a transition from one state of being to another. This understanding removes the fundamental fear that underlies most human anxiety. When you know experientially that you are immortal consciousness temporarily inhabiting a physical form, the urgency and drama of ordinary life begin to fade. You can engage fully with your human experience while maintaining the perspective of your eternal nature. The seventh transformation involves what we might call miraculous abilities, though from the perspective of the divine frequency, these are simply natural expressions of consciousness operating without the usual limitations. You might find that your intuition becomes incredibly precise, that you seem to know things without learning them, that synchronicities multiply in your life to an almost magical degree. Some people develop what appear to be psychic abilities, the capacity for telepathic communication, precognitive dreams, or healing through touch. Others find that their creative abilities expand dramatically, that they can access inspired solutions to problems, or that they naturally know how to help others in exactly the way they need. These abilities aren't the goal of spiritual development, but they often arise naturally as byproducts of aligning with the divine frequency. The key is not to become attached to them or to use them to bolster the ego, but to see them as gifts to be used in service of the greater good. Now you might be wondering how to actually access this sacred frequency yourself. The ancient texts provide numerous clues, but they often speak in symbolic language that can be difficult to interpret. Let me share with you some practical approaches that have proven effective across different traditions and time periods. The foundation of accessing the divine frequency is learning to quiet the mind. This doesn't mean suppressing thoughts or forcing mental silence. Instead, it means developing the capacity to observe thoughts without being caught up in them. Start by sitting quietly for a few minutes each day, simply watching the stream of thoughts that flows through your consciousness without trying to control or change it. As you practice this observation, you'll begin to notice gaps between thoughts, moments of natural silence. These gaps are doorways to the divine frequency. As your practice deepens, these gaps will naturally expand until you can rest in the silence that underlies all mental activity. The second key is cultivating what the traditions call devotion or surrender. This doesn't mean believing in a particular religious doctrine, but rather developing a willingness to let go of the ego's need to control every aspect of experience. When you release the grip of the personal will and open to something greater than yourself, you create space for the divine frequency to emerge. You can practice this surrender in small ways throughout your day. When you're stuck in traffic, instead of fighting the situation, relax into it and look for the gift it might contain. When someone criticizes you, instead of defending yourself, consider whether there might be truth in their words. When things don't go according to your plans, see if you can find acceptance and even gratitude for what is actually happening. The third element involves what we might call energetic purification. The divine frequency is incredibly subtle, and it can be obscured by what the traditions call impurities in the energy system. These aren't moral failings, but rather patterns of thinking, feeling, and behaving that create static in your consciousness. Regular practices like yoga, breathwork, time in nature, creative expression, and service to others can help clear these energetic blockages. The key is consistency rather than intensity. A little bit of purification practice each day is more effective than occasional intensive efforts. The fourth aspect involves developing what the mystics call discrimination or discernment. As you begin to access higher states of consciousness, you need to learn to distinguish between genuine spiritual experience and various forms of spiritual fantasy or delusion. This requires both humility and wisdom, the willingness to question your experiences while remaining open to genuine revelation. A reliable test is to examine the fruits of your spiritual experiences. Do they make you more loving, more peaceful, more generous, more humble? Do they serve the good of all beings, or do they primarily boost your ego? Genuine experiences of the divine frequency consistently produce what the traditions call virtues, not because you're trying to be good, but because goodness naturally flows from alignment with the source. As you begin to access this sacred frequency more regularly, you'll notice that your entire life starts to reorganize itself around this new vibrational state. Relationships that don't support your awakening may naturally fade away, while new connections with like-minded individuals seem to appear effortlessly. Career opportunities that align with your deeper purpose may present themselves, while work that feels meaningless becomes increasingly difficult to tolerate. This isn't always comfortable. The process of awakening can involve what the mystics call the dark night of the soul, periods where your old way of being dissolves faster than the new way has fully stabilized. During these transitions, it's important to be patient and compassionate with yourself, trusting that the intelligence that's orchestrating your awakening knows what it's doing. Remember that finding God's secret frequency is not a one-time event, but an ongoing process of alignment. Each time you choose love over fear, presence over distraction, truth over comfort, you're tuning more deeply into this sacred vibration. Each time you respond to life's challenges from your highest self rather than your reactive patterns, you're strengthening your connection to the divine source. The ultimate secret is that this frequency has been calling to you your entire life. Every moment of beauty that took your breath away, every experience of unconditional love, every insight that seemed to come from beyond your ordinary mind, these were all glimpses of your true nature, attempting to remind you of who you really are. You are not a human being having spiritual experiences. You are a spiritual being having a human experience. The frequency you're seeking to find is actually the frequency you're seeking to remember. It's not somewhere else, waiting to be discovered. It's here now in this very moment, as the consciousness that's aware of these words, as the presence that witnesses your thoughts and feelings, as the love that animates your very existence. The journey of awakening is really a journey of remembering what you've temporarily forgotten. God's secret frequency is not God's secret from you, it's your secret from yourself. The moment you're ready to stop seeking outside yourself and start recognizing what's already present within you, that's the moment your true life begins. This transformation is available to anyone willing to make the journey inward. It doesn't require special abilities, advanced education, or perfect circumstances. It only requires the courage to question everything you think you know about yourself and reality, and the willingness to discover what remains when all false identities fall away. As we conclude, remember that the information shared here is not meant to be merely intellectual entertainment. These are practical instructions for the most important discovery you could ever make, the discovery of your own divine nature. The frequency of God is not something you will find someday in the future. It's something you can begin to tune into right now, in this very moment, by simply becoming present to the awareness that's reading these words. Your awakening is not just a personal journey. Every individual who remembers their true nature contributes to the collective awakening of humanity. In finding God's secret frequency, you become a beacon of that same frequency for others who are still searching. This is how consciousness evolves, one awakening at a time, until the entire world remembers what it temporarily forgot. The frequency is calling. The only question is whether you're ready to answer.